Good morning and welcome to Morning Java, brought to you as always by our friends at the Get Go Cafe and Market, where actually we'll be headed right upon the conclusion of this particular program. I'm joined in the Carter household by Carter.
What's up, DK?
What's up, Carter?
I'm all right, man. Just quarantining, staying safe out here in the Carter household. Welcome to Casa de Carter of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Java is going to end up being like this almost documentary on the progression of the coronavirus thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
We went from just doing it in this one house, then we ended up doing it on the street, and now we're doing it in each other's homes. This has been an interesting progression.
And next week it'll be in different solar systems and whatever else. It'll be hello Carter, hello Carter.
We haven't gone to masks yet, so we're fine there.
Well, if you think about it, we could have done this outdoors with masks and whatever. But again, like there are things that are safe and that are allowed, but at the same time, don't necessarily send the best message. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And you know what? We do fine with Zoom. We've been doing those happy hours for Mike's Beer Bar. So and Zoom's great. So I think this is more than reasonable, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy the show.
Carter, how many mock drafts are enough? How many do you go through? How many do you do?
I mean, so I haven't published any mock drafts this year, but I've done at least 20 mock drafts so far, just through my head, just different scenarios. In fact, on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I do a mock draft Monday every week where I review a mock draft from the draftnetwork.com. And then I also, I ask for all of our listeners. So you should do this too. If you're not already part of our Facebook group, you can search Locked On Steelers on Facebook, join the group. And every Monday, I pick the winner of this contest where everyone's sending all their mock drafts of all the Steelers picks and who they think. And then I go by player who I thought did the best or who I thought was the most interesting. And then I list out the positives and negatives of each player and why I think it should or shouldn't work for the Steelers. So it's something, especially this year because of what we're going through. You kind of have to do it more. But every year it's just kind of fun just to go through the different options because you never know who's going to fly up the boards. Like the year where the Steelers took Terrell Edmunds, I thought Justin Reed was going to be the safety that everyone jumped on. And he
remember
the third round, and now here he is doing very well in the NFL. So it's kind of wild. You never know. Like you can expect, we all expect, Joe Burrow to go number 1, Chase Young to go number 2, Jeff Okudah to go number 3, and Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert fitting their way in there. But you never know what some teams are thinking. Sometimes they'll go way somewhere else, and that changes up your entire strategy because say, like how Dale and I have been talking about for a while, say 10 offensive tackles fly off the board, that's what's probably going to happen, and the Steelers couldn't draft one. But say by some chance, the only 5 offensive tackles fly off the board. Now it's like, okay, well, do we actually want to look at some of these guys? Because there's a lot of really good talent on the offensive line in this year's draft. So the mock drafts are just every week, just kind of just seeing what new information is out there.
Yeah, but see, that's the part that gets me. There isn't new information in this setting. We're not finding out that, Joe Blow got busted for doing pot or whatever. You know what I mean? That drops you down 2-3 rounds or whatever. Character issues come up. We're not finding out that so-and-so, blew out a knee or whatever else. Nothing really is going to change.
Right.
For the next 2-3 weeks. So it almost feels like a lot of these regular mock drafts, constantly changing mock drafts is, it almost feels a little bit forced in this environment.
Sometimes it's also about, because a lot of these guys, they're doing what I do, but on a grand scale. Like a lot of those guys that work for the Draft Network, they're doing this 24/7. So some of them are just catching up to watching some of these later round picks, and they're like, whoa, Michael Divinity from LSU, maybe we should look at him. Like there's a lot of that going on. So certain guys, it just depends on what people like, and then it also depends on what words. Like you hear all these interviews, like Kevin Colbert's come out and said some things. Now for weeks, I've been yelling at into my podcast that the Steelers are not going to take an edge rusher with their first pick of the draft. I just said it wasn't going to happen, but all the national guys thought it was going to happen because they saw Bud Dupree, and they're like, oh, well, he's going to be gone. I'm like, no, but you don't know that Bud Dupree is going to be here no matter what. And now that he's been signed, now people are like, oh, well, maybe they will look at a running back. And I'm like, this is what I've been saying for weeks. So it's interesting just to see the temperament of where everyone is on what teams are going to focus on different areas.
We'll be back with more from Casa de Carter. When I think of the Steelers drafting best player available, especially in the first round, which of course they don't have a first round pick this year, I always think to Marquise Pouncey, to David DeCastro, to guys that they've taken bang right up because they felt like they got somebody special who felt. I know they felt that way with Pounce, and they were like giddy, like jumping over the moon with DeCastro, you'll recall. And you know what? Rightly so on both counts.
Right.
What they did for the interior of their line for a decade plus is immeasurable. So here I think to myself, second round, 49th overall pick, you're not going to get a special offensive lineman. I think we both agree on that in looking at this class. But I just wonder, like, to what extent do they need that anyway right now? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I agree with you, because coming into this draft, before the season even ended, I was keeping up on big boards and seeing what people were weighing. And there were a lot of people that were saying offensive line might last you into the second round as far as some of the better picks. But then as people got to see more tape and there was more discussions being had and you saw how people did in the combine, everyone was like, okay, yeah, offensive line is going to be gone by the time that second round pick.
Right.
So if there was that guy, if that guy did fall to that round, then absolutely, yeah, you would take that person, because I do think that this team is missing that third anchor on the offensive line. Remember back in 2014 when it was Pouncey and DeCastro and Gilbert and the three of them together, and you had a young Villanueva and Ramon Foster was still doing really well, but it was those three guys that really carried the load for the offensive line. They were doing the damage. And if you remember, there was twice in, I think it was 2015, where Von Miller went up against Marcus Gilbert, and he was shut out both times.
Oh, Marcus, totally underappreciated player while he was in Pittsburgh. No question.
And I think that they have missed that dominating. They've had good right tackle play, but they've missed dominating play at their right tackle position, which is why I think that if that player magically fell to them, that'd be a great pick. But I just don't think it's going to happen this year with all the teams that need tackles and all the really good tackle prospects that are going to go early.
Okay, but let's talk about who's on that radar right now. Okay, because if you're talking about a potentially dominant right tackle or whatever, I mean, look, there isn't someone of pedigree or of high draft pick quality who's on the current roster. However, there's no way you couldn't have liked what Zach Banner did.
Right.
Chooks, I know, couldn't get on the field, Chooks Okorafor, but I think they might have other designs for him anyway. How do you see the line shaping up? Because I'll tell you, I could see a situation where they try to set up Chooks, specifically Chooks, as a backup at either tackle, because no one talks about, even the most in-depth analyses of the Steelers' offensive line seems to neglect the fact that Alejandro Villanueva doesn't have a ready-made backup right now.
Right. No, I do agree with that. And having a guy that could flip between right or left tackle would be very nice. The two things I'll say on, if we're assuming Matt Filer starts at left guard and it's going to be a new right tackle this year, if it's Zach Banner, he had a very good year with the Steelers. His biggest thing is he has to work on following through. There's too many times I think he gets off the ball really well. I think he initially engages very well, but there's too many times I think he doesn't finish as well because of his foot drive. And there's times you won't see him, when he gets on a block, he'll get his man, but he won't be driving them as far as they could, or he lets them do a little bit extra at the end. But that stuff, again, that comes with time. He has been reshaping his career. He lost a ton of weight. He's gotten a lot better than what he was before. So there's no reason to suspect that Zach Banner wouldn't be able to do that. Chukuma Okorafor, it's the same thing that I've said on him since I watched his days at Western Michigan. The guy needs to be more aggressive. He needs to want to bury people. He's very good at dropping back in pass protection and doing his job, putting his hand out, making sure, hey, I'm taking care of this guy. This guy's locked down. But in the run game, you just don't see that aggression that I want to bury you. I want to pancake you and just destroy you and maul you. And
DeCastro.
Yeah, DeCastro, exactly. DeCastro, when you see those guys just, I get my hands on you and you're done, That's where I think Okorafor needs to improve his game. Now, he could learn that. He can get there. Sometimes, guys, Villanueva was a guy for years. He was very passive in how he blocked because he didn't understand the full workings of right. He didn't want to put his hands out. But after year two, you started to see him use that strike point. Hey, I have these 6'9" arms that can get out and mess up your entire rush plan. And then you have games where he did really well against Myles Garrett. So I think they're in a good place. They have talent for sure. But I do think in the coming years, they need to reload and get themselves an offensive line anchor. It might not be this year, but maybe in the 2021 draft or the 2022 draft, just to reinvigorate that offensive line and help the run game for the next decade or so.
Well, to finish out the 2020 aspect of it, I happen to agree with you on that especially. You do have to replenish. Before long, they're going to have to do it on the defensive line too, which is obviously a separate subject. For as far as the coming season is concerned, I'm going to use B.J. Finney's name as a verb and say, are they going to B.J. Finney Stefan Wisniewski? And by that I mean, of course, that he would be the backup at left guard. And because he's the backup at center, he won't get on the field. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen, too. I think you're going to see him be willing to flip between all those positions. You might even see him at right guard if DeCastro goes down. It just depends on what they fancy as far as where he's fitting in. But I do think that because of his ability to flip between the interior offensive line spots, you're going to see the Steelers be like, okay, Filer, you take that position. Wisniewski, we're going to put you in only if it means this situation. Because
in a bubble. But he's going to be in a bubble like Finney was, because they were always aware and concerned about, in particular, Marquise going down. You've got to have somebody to snap the ball.
Right.
And that's, and they actually would tell BJ, that's why you're not getting on the field. And it's like being punished for having an extra skill. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But at the same time, that keeps you employed. So it's being punished because you don't see that playing time. But Wisniewski, he gets to come home. He gets to at least show his value. And you know what? Injuries happen. And in a year, we're going to have an expanded season. So you're going to see an extra game, and you're going to have even more chances for that to stand out. So I think that Wisniewski's probably going to not see the field that much because they're going to want to protect him in case the ultimate situation happens where Pouncey's out and they need that backup. But I fully expect for him to be perfectly fine with that role, and I don't think it will slow him down quite a bit. You saw how he jumped in for the Chiefs in this past playoff runs after not playing for weeks. He looks like a veteran that can do that. Like, hey, you need you to do this. And he's like, okay, I got you, boss. And he does pretty well.
Ben Roethlisberger is going to be back.
Yes.
I don't think anybody would dispute that at this point. Most importantly, not the Steelers, and definitely not Ben. There seems to be a common perception, and maybe it's a correct one for all we know, that he's going to take some necessary step backward, or that he's not going to be what he was. I'm not sure I completely understand that, because the elbow and everything else, when it's surgically repaired, it's a pretty clean, simple ligament. It's either working or it's not.
Right.
There's not degrees to it. You don't lose arm strength over elbow surgery, if that makes any sense.
No, I got you. No,
Go ahead.
My thing is this. You see, it's always that split, and I didn't understand this split until I came back from being away from college. Of how Ben Roethlisberger is perceived locally. There's people that give him the chance, that give him that say, hey, Ben can work through anything, and there's that belief that Ben Roethlisberger is going to dig it out. But it was nationally where I didn't understand, because nationally, when I went to college at Cheney University, the first historically black college out near Philadelphia, and all I saw was ESPN, NFL, and their takes on it, and everyone was just always so down on Ben, and I was just like, man, Ben's up against all odds no matter what. But I come back to Pittsburgh, and Ben can do no wrong. So there's that dichotomy of how he's perceived, and I always think that's very interesting. So from a national perspective, you got people like Adam Shine of CBS Sports saying that, oh, Ben's done, get him out of here, he stinks. Steelers fans, you had your fun. But then you have a lot of people I think around here like, well, if Ben says he's throwing clean, I trust that he's throwing clean right now.
I can't.
I don't see anything that should say that.
Again, I think I talk and write a lot about perceptions or misperceptions. And I think the one that applies here from a football standpoint is that we have seen quarterbacks, arguably the two greatest quarterbacks of their generation in Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, both get a little bit, in Peyton's case, a lot noodle-armed once they reach a certain stage. However, Peyton Manning had a major neck issue. And a surgery that really constricted him. Brady, we don't know. The only thing we know about Brady in this context, although he's had obviously injury issues as well, quietly, and most commonly accepted that they're shoulder related, that's a very complicated area, unlike the wrist. The doctors that I've talked to, specifically baseball doctors who have to open up pitchers and so forth, will tell you that the shoulder is such a mess that you can't tell anything until you're in there, which is the medical term for obviously the actual surgery. There's no MRI or whatever that shows it. Whereas elbows, again, are one and done. You're in there, ligament fixed, see ya, have a nice day. We'll validate your parking on the way out. It's not complicated.
Right.
So Ben has not only a healed elbow, theoretically, okay? And he says so, and everyone else does. But he also has now the benefit of the additional year.
Yeah, he has a year off.
Of not throwing and getting pounded and tackled and and falling on the shoulder and his knees and everything else. Carter, there isn't an athlete anywhere, regardless of age, that won't attest to that having an immense effect. You still have to work your way back into shape and all that other stuff, but to be able to do it pain-free is a really, really big deal as a plus.
Right. And again, what I've been saying ever since like the middle of the season is when you look back at 2018, you see how many times he threw the football and how often he threw the football and how much it was needed to get the team going. Because they didn't have a supreme defense in 2018 and they didn't have a reliable ground game as James Conner was still figuring things out. You saw him kind of overextend himself. I think that's what the Steelers are going to protect against doing. And I think if you let Ben Roethlisberger stay in that under, at the most he throws 30 times a game, I think that's a safe rate and that he's going to be able to make the smart decisions in his offense to keep the offense going and to make sure that he's dissecting defenses. Again, I think the picking up of Ebron is going to allow for that 12 personnel look that's going to be very interesting. I think that he still has a group of young receivers that are a threat. And if the Steelers develop a really strong ground game, you're not going to have to see Ben do what he did in 2018. You might have to see him do, honestly, what he did in 2010 or 2008. Just have him make the plays that are in front of him, make more adjustments at the line of scrimmage. But some of those adjustments might be, hey, James Conner or whoever they draft this year, here's the ball, go get the 5 or 6 yards that are here because of this alignment that favors our offensive line. Those are the things I think Ben Roethlisberger, he can do without any overstraining of any arm problems people think he's going to have. I'm with you. I think that the elbow surgery is it could end up being a very good thing to help him get back to normal because, let's be honest, in the Patriots game last year and even in the Bengals game that ended the season before, you didn't see a normal Ben Roethlisberger, and it was kind of weird. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back. But, this is Ben Roethlisberger. This guy had his nose broken in a game and threw a game-winning touchdown in the same night. So I don't doubt that he's going to find a way to fight through this, be an effective quarterback, and get his team to the playoffs.
This two tights package, that sounds like it'd make a pretty good article.
Oh, man. No. I should have thought of that a long time ago. Jeez, Dan, I don't know who can write that thing because I don't know
either. I keep hearing about it.